What's going on, guys, and welcome to the 72nd Xamarin Android tutorial. So this video is going to be consisting of mainly using a tool called the Graph API Explorer. So with Facebook, there's a Graph API which you can get lots of just basically analytical data from the current user that's logged into your application. So and naturally, of course, it's something that we want to be able to work with. And I'm going to briefly go over just a few things with it and using a tool to kind of get more associated with the Graph API. And then we'll go ahead and I've gotten a few requests of how to get the email address of the user. Well, if it, of course, exists, and that's using the Graph API to get that. And the email address isn't always guaranteed to come back because of the fact that you can sign up through Facebook via phone number. Therefore, there may be users out there that don't have an email address, but if it is available, it will come. So the Facebook account that I'm using right now does have an email address, and we'll take a look at how to get the email address using the Graph API. But first, let's come and what I did. I came over here and I Googled Graph API Facebook Explorer, and I came into the Facebook developer website. And if you click on the Graph API Explorer, you'll see you'll be directed to a tool here. And this tool, guys, is super helpful because of the fact that you can emulate the way that your application will work and the data that you will get back based on your permissions. So the token that's generated via or based on your permissions. So what I mean by that is if you come over here and you go to get access token. Now look at all of these permissions, and what this is doing, guys, is this is saying, okay, so this is the permissions that we want to enable or disable, and there's some more permissions over here, and these directly correlate with the permissions that you set when the user logs in. So right now we have public profile, which is actually by default already set, but we did it explicitly here, and then we have user underscore friends. So notice that there is a user underscore friends which we have checked. So based on the permissions that we asked for, and then these are the ones that of course the user is prompted with and must agree to or edit in order to go through to your application. Those are the ones that these are the parameters here are directly dependent on what access token is generated and what permissions your application has. So I will further explain that here in a second. But let's go ahead and look at this. So let's go ahead and get access token, and we want to actually go into user friends. So since say also user about me, and then we do get access token, which we'll have to agree to. Now it's basically going to generate a access token based on the permissions that we're asking for. I'll agree to them, and then here is something that you can actually just dump inside of your application if you want to emulate it through your application. Don't leave it like that, of course, but if you wanted to just kind of see how it is, how the way it's working, you can just dump this string inside of it. So, but we're not going to do that. This is going to be a emulation inside of the web browser. Now here we can leave this as get, and notice that as we add more fields, it'll append on, and it'll do a comma separated field for each one. So it'll delimit based on the comma, all right. And then it'll be and all these are now, if you're familiar with a get request, these are all asking for a particular property. So what we can do is we can uncheck these and just say, okay, so this is saying I want this permission, so that I have these permissions about me and friends, and with those I want the ID and the name of the Facebook user. So that's what it's saying right here. So we'll go ahead and submit it, and this is what we get. All right, so we get these two values that are JSON encoded, and down over here we can actually specify some more values. So, you know, we can do age range is one of them, and then we'll go ahead and resubmit. So this is the type of data that we're going to get back based on this request, based on this access token. So what that is saying is, or what that's doing is giving us a really good example of really the kind of data that we're going to be looking with and whether it's going to be available to us or not. And what do I mean by that? Well, you know, because like I said, these fields are directly dependent on the fact of what your application has permission to. So say we come into here and we say, okay, I want email. So I want the email address of the Facebook user, and I'll go ahead and submit. But I don't get an email address here. So notice that in this data, I have no email address. But notice that over here, it's sort of grayed out. So if we hover over it, it'll say field is empty or disallowed by the access token. Well, remember a few minutes ago I mentioned that you cannot. It's possible that you won't be able to get the email address based on the fact that the user can sign up through Facebook using their phone number. So an email address may not be registered with the user. Or it says disallowed by the access token, which is actually our problem right now, because I know this Facebook account has an email address. So it must be the second one, which is disallowed by the access token. And what that means, guys, is it means that I don't have permission for this email. Okay, so the email address, I'm asking for an email address, but the user never, that's a separate permission that it's dependent on, and the user never gave me access to be able to get their email address. All right, so if you come over here, we go to get access token, and then we'll go to extended permissions, and we'll click on email. So now that I'll regenerate another, I'll agree to that, and it'll regenerate, if you saw that, it'll regenerate a get access or access token. And then now that I have email, now that I have access to that email, and I've as a user, I have agreed to letting this application access my email if they want to, I'll submit it, and there's my email now. And notice that it's no longer grayed out. So this is really helpful because of the fact that we can come over here back into Visual Studio, and then we can say we forget to set the permission email, but we actually ask the permission on the request, which is what we do. You know, this is the request right here, right? But it'll be a little more ambiguous when we're running the app, because it's like, you know, it's not coming in at all, and we're like, hey, what the heck, what's going on? But with this, it's, you know, if we turn back off the email, go ahead and just clear the data, turn these permissions back on, but no email. Notice that it'll now, you know, like I showed before, it'll now show us. So the application will, you know, allow us to be able to see that very well. But here we can kind of test the permissions that we want using this. And then we can come back into here and we can actually ask for the fields that we want, which all directly correlate to where the permissions in the fields that we will request inside our application. So here is like a good way to say, okay, everything looks good. It looks like it's going to work perfectly. I'm going to be able to have all of these properties and these fields given to me, and all my access token is being generated with the right permissions. Okay, now let me go back to my application and do what I need to do. So that being said, let's go ahead and do that now, guys. So what we can do is we can leave that one on, and we can do email. Okay, and submit. So now if we see that, you know, this is, let's say that all that we need the age range, the email, and then of course you can come into here and then add some more stuff, you know, devices, education, you know, whatever is available that the user has inputted into their account. But say that we would just want these four for right now. So what we'll do is we'll come back over here, and we want to make sure public profile will leave. Remember, we already had user friends, and then also we had another one called user underscore about underscore me. So what we'll do is come over here, user underscore about me, and then of course the big one is email. So we want to make sure that we request that as well. And remember, if we're already logged in, it's not gonna just, you know, give us those permissions. The user's gonna have to re-log in, and so we'll have to force a log out or something if you're gonna update the permissions. So to force them to log back in and therefore agree to these new terms. All right. So that being said, what we can do is we can now add a button to get this sort of data, you know, and just to give you guys an example of what it is. So come into here, and I do already have a button set up. Yeah, so get email is the button that I set up, you know, just to give you guys a brief and kind of quick example of what we're doing here. So I already have it here. It's already tied up through the XML. So go ahead and make a button to do that, or, you know, something else that's probably going to be a little more useful with your application, of course. So with that, you know, now I have my button, and I believe I already have the button wired up right here. So I'll come into here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a graph request. So what I'll do is first I'll do the button click. So I'm going to do click plus equals, and I'm just going to go ahead and shorthand this. Something like this should work, guys. Okay, so on the button click, we want to make a graph request. So what we'll do is we'll do graph request, and then we'll just call it request. And there's a static method inside of the graph request class, and it is called new.me request. And we'll do new.me request, and it needs 2 parameters, and the first one is the access token. And remember, the access token is static inside of the access token class, so we'll get current access token, which correlate directly to the web explorer that we were using before. So that's our access token. And then next we need it's going to be a graph request, an iGraph JSON object callback. And then of course we're going to do this, because this class is also going to be acting as a callback. And I already have it up here, graph request.iGraph JSON object callback, which implements only one method. So that method is somewhere. Right here. So it's in onCompleted. It's the onCompleted method, which has 2 parameters that it passes over, okay? And it's going to be in the form of JSON, which is going to be the JSON string right here. So now guys, if we come back over to our button click event, we of course need to do a few more things. What we'll do first is now we need to send it some parameters. Okay, so we use a bundle for parameters, and we'll do instantiate a new object of bundle type, and then we'll do parameters dot put string, and this is going to be a key value. So we'll do fields, and then these are all the comma separated fields that we want. Remember, it's exactly this. Fields, and then this is the value, right? This is the key fields, and then ID, name, age, range, blah blah blah. So we can literally just copy this part right here exactly, because this is how it's going to be inside of the GET request. All right, so something like that. So now we have our string that it's going to be calling. So hopefully now guys, you'll be able to see why that web explorer tool is so helpful, because we can literally kind of get everything set up, and then we can pretty much just copy and paste it over what we need. All right, so the parameters, the request, we got to assign these parameters. So we'll do the request.parameters equals the bundle, which we named parameters, and then we want to actually execute. Okay, so we'll do execute async. All right, and what that's going to do, guys, is it's going to execute it, of course, asynchronously, and what it'll do is it'll call back this method right down here, which we'll move kind of further up. It'll be a little more clear. All right, so that's going to actually output the JSON that we saw inside of that tool. But let's go ahead and make sure that works, the way we expect it to. So it should output ID, name, age, range, email, and then you guys can just keep concatenating and comma separated string with another field, and then another field, and another field, and so on. And it should, as long as you have the right permissions, remember, give you back those values. And of course, if it's available, and maybe the Facebook account hasn't put in their hobbies or whatever it is. All right, so let's go ahead and start this emulator up. All right, so we got our Facebook SDK ready to go, and the first thing we need to do is log in, of course. So now that we've logged in, I already had it logged in before, but if you log in for the first time with the new permissions, it should prompt you and re-ask the user yourself. In this case, if you want to agree to these new permissions that it's asking for. So if you do, of course, want to agree to it, and then you should be good to go. Now, when you click email, make sure you're logged in. When you hit get email, you'll see here at the bottom, you may have seen nothing happen, which is there's no UI, of course, for it. Don't want to really take too much time on doing that, but this is kind of gets the point across, hopefully, of how to get the graph request going. But if you do come down here, you should see the JSON right here in the console, which is exactly what we're doing in the callback. We are writing out to the console the JSON string. All right, just the raw format. So here, if you look down here, you'll see ID, you'll see email, which is the guy that we're kind of going for right now. Age range, which is another it's like an embedded nested JSON, so it's got a min of 18 and a max, so it's a range in this case. And then of course you have your name. So you know, once again, you know, if any fields you have, guys, you're gonna want to specify here. Let's go up at the top, and then like I said before, these directly correspond to the fields right here. And really, if you wanted to, you can really actually send out a HTTP request using the HTTP client or something like that in .NET, and put out the full, here's the full URL, and then have a GET request that will just, you know, concatenate and use a comma delimiter to have your to list your fields. So, and then of course your token. So I mean, and then you can get the raw JSON that way. But the API sort of takes care of a lot of that for you. You don't really have to do too much of that. And behind the scenes is what's going on with the requests and the GET requests and all that. So it kind of takes care of a lot for you. But you know, it's always good to do it that way if you want to have a little more control over what's going on. But just keep in mind that this is important, what you specify, and what you actually specify here is directly dependent on the permissions that you ask the user to have. So there you go, guys. I mean, there's the JSON that it prints out, and I'm thinking about doing the next video. It's gonna be, I think it'll be pretty cool to, you know, this gives us a good idea of what the JSON is, right, and what the output's going to look like. So depending on that, we can kind of set up an entity that will give us back something, and then we can go ahead and come into here with our raw JSON, and then we can toString it, and then deserialize the object using probably like JSON.NET to deserialize the object and put it into an actual .NET object in memory, and then you can easily get, like, you know, email, name, ID, or whatever with that through the graph request, you know. So that's not something really part of the SDK, but that's kind of a little idea I thought, and probably many other people have had, to take that JSON and really just, you know, take more control of it by putting it into memory. Of course, is usually what you'll do with JSON by deserializing it. So, but anyways, that is how to use, getting started at least with the Graph API, and particularly how to receive the email if it is available from the user. All right. As always, thanks for watching, guys.